afternoon, everybody, and happy Thursday, June 20th. Oh my goodness, it is. I can't believe it is almost the end of June here, and I still feel like, summer hasn't even started. Although summer kind of has started here in New Hampshire. It's super hot, super humid, big old heat wave coming in. Hopefully you can't see the air conditioner over my shoulder literally blowing on me in the background, but my gosh, it is really warm here in New Hampshire, but I guess that's what we have to deal with. Really excited to have Cariel back here from Securely today, wrapping up our series on SOC2 compliance and air conditioner over my shoulder. Let me turn myself off in the other window so I'm not like double echoing. So anyways, Cariel, take a moment, say hello, welcome, tell us a little bit about who, what, where, when, how, why, and all the fun things.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for having me again on this amazing space that you've created. I don't think you can complain about heat. We're down here in Boca Raton and it's way hotter than in New Hampshire, I assure you that. But anyway, happy to embark in this journey with you, and obviously looking forward to the summer. Hopefully, a lot of people are taking a break during the summer and getting some well-deserved rest.
Yeah, the summer is really interesting because it's when all the conferences happen. We just got back from PAX 8 a week or so ago. PAX 8 Beyond, great show, great conference, good content for the MSPs. Huge vendor showcase floor, and they had Ludacris at the end concert. I was telling my kids, and they're like, "Get video, Ludacris," and I'm like, "I don't even know who this guy is." And then I was like, "Oh, yeah, now I know who he is." Duh, I guess being the old dude. But I suppose I should take a second and say hello myself. Hold on, let me do this and that. Good afternoon, everybody. Tim Golden, founder and CEO of Compliance Scorecard, where we help you have the risk conversation with your customer using our unique scorecards. All right, got that out of the way. Yay, I should probably do that. Make sure I always forget to do my own thing. So we're kind of wrapping up this series on SOC2 compliance. We kind of started with, what is this? How does it apply? And really getting into the meat of it today with, as an MSP, how do we sell this? How do we package this and price this and do something with it, right? And so really excited. Cariel, why don't you talk a little bit about just pen test as a service as a whole, right?
Yeah, of course. So I'd love to also start with a little bit, backtracking on our journey at Securely. When we started, our first customer had just received a pen test report from a third party, and claiming that they had some issues and they were going to offboard them from the platform that they were running in. And so that sparked a whole branch of work for them, which was, okay, what do we do first to get these issues resolved? And how does that affect us in terms of compliance? And then they realized how the lack of compliance and the lack of proper security posture was limiting their ability to close deals. And so that's how, for us, it was a matter of choosing, well, what do we specialize in? Do we go the compliance route? Do we go the pen testing route, etc.? And for us, the pen testing route was more natural, especially with my expertise. And pen testing as a service became a passion of ours in terms of you could spend, there are over 800 tests. I think I mentioned this last time, in between the two main frameworks for pen testing, which are OWASP and MITRE. So choosing which ones you run and running through that would take a whole year or more, or 2 or 3 years to test a platform. And so how do you compress that at the same add value and focus on what will prevent risks more efficiently for our customers?
So OWASP and MITRE attacks, right? So there are a couple of things that can be automated, right? We talk about Burp Suite. We've kind of had those conversations over the last couple of weeks as we've dived deeper into this, right? But maybe you can talk a little bit about what is pen test as a service, right? I think it's probably beyond just running a vulnerability scan, right?
Right. Yeah, that's the interesting part. So a Pentests as a service, it's more of an actual manual penetration tester or a certified ethical hacker performing those tests. What a tool does is it can run a scan and it can run a specific test, but what a pen tester can craft that a scanner cannot, it's a sequence of tests that will take inputs and outputs from different results from those scans, and then basically enable the next action, so that you can perform or an exploit.
I see. So if I were to think of this like beyond just the vulnerability scan, right? So you discovered stuff, right? You did some scans, you discovered some loopholes, you discovered some things, right? So beyond that, it's literally taking your people and running them through a process to actually try to exploit the vulnerabilities that are found. Is that correct?
Exactly. And
right.
then the beauty of that is if once you find those exploits, right, there are certain things that need to happen. First, you need to build them into a report. That's part of the pen test as a service offering. And then you need to make sure that your customer remediates those issues. And then third, you need to retest that and then put it back into the report and say, okay, we found this, it was remediated on this date, and we proved that it was remediated.
So if I was an MSP and like kind of really digging deeper into the whole, how do I package this and what do I do, right? So if I was going to build a service offering around penetration testing as a service, I think I might start with one of the obvious, which is a vulnerability scan, right? Determine like what do you think would be, the obvious things to build a package around offering this to our customer?
That's a good point. So, there are certain tools that are out there that are very that lend themselves really well for MSPs to resell the services. One of them is Nessus, which they can use for external penetration testing from the network perspective. They do have some application testing as well. So it's a very good tool where you can manage all your customers in there and then basically run testing, issue reports. So from the MSP perspective, that's a very profitable way to do it. Also, Burp Suite, it's another tool, but it's a little bit more specific towards application vulnerabilities and testing. Sorry, can you repeat the question? I just
trying to determine like what would go into a package. So vulnerability scans with either Nessus or our good friends Connect Secure, right? Doing a vulnerability scan against devices. That is, I would imagine, one bucket of things, right? You mentioned Burp Suite, so doing a vulnerability scan against applications, right? Because it's not just the devices; it might be applications that are vulnerable as well. So, vulnerability scanning, one key component of building out this pen test or this compliance as a service. What else do you think might be in there as well? Like, tell me a little bit more about maybe what Securely does beyond the vulnerability scanning.
Right. Yeah. Beyond the scanning, we do again. We get a certified ethical hacker involved, and in doing that manual penetration testing, and so we find that's key. It's key evidence that third parties are asking for. So we think that's an important piece of evidence that you should add. And I know many MSPs out there have their own pen testers in-house, and so that's a good thing. With the way we see it at Securely,
I challenge that, right? A lot of the MSPs that we talk to don't actually have in-house expertise, FTE on staff as certified ethical hackers. They might have hacks. They might have some people that like have Googled some stuff, done some training, done some videos, kind of done some stuff to kind of build their own knowledge.
Yeah.
But they might not have that, like, I hate to say, certified ethical hacker, somebody that has been actually trained appropriately and regulatory wise legally to be able to do that kind of stuff, right? To be able to get an engagement in place with a customer and let them know we're coming after you, right? MSPs probably don't have that, in-depth knowledge of how to do that appropriately, legally, contractually, all the things, right? And so we've identified the first bucket, which is vulnerability scanning for both devices and applications.
Right.
I think we've just talked about a second bucket, which is have a human that knows what they're doing. Yes. Right.
And funny enough, I mean, if you go on Reddit, you'll see there's all sorts of mixed opinions. Like some MSPs say they have their own manual pen testers and that they are better than anyone ever, but some other ones are like clueless. And obviously, like that's the challenge that we are trying to address. And I think obviously the challenge that these frameworks are looking to address is create a baseline for what needs to be tested. How does it need to be tested to really be a test that it's a real manual pen test, that it's valuable for the customer, So
you mentioned a third bucket, which we've talked about in previous, which is defining the scope of the engagement, right?
Exactly.
So you have some tools, you have some people. Now we're right into the process of the scope. Right. So if I'm building a package and a service offering as an MSP, I need some tools, I need some people. Now I need to really hone in on what is it that we're actually offering, right? What is the scope of this, right?
And obviously a 101, a very important tip for MSPs that are doing pen testing is make sure that before you run a pen test, send a pen testing agreement ahead of time that is separate to your MSP agreement with the customer, because the act of doing penetration testing can be misconstrued as hacking if it's not explicitly put into an agreement and signed at least electronically. Then you may end up in a problem. So that's an important thing.
You make a really good point there, right? So rules of engagement, right? Not just what you're going to do, what you're going to look at, where and what times, right? But as an MSP, if we're doing the best practices, the gold standards of stuff, and we're running SOC, SIM, SOAR, EDR, MDR, all the DRs, we're running all these tools. Hopefully those tools will pick up the things that we're doing, right? And so making sure you have a solid rules of engagement in place. And, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, which was, do you let your SOC know that you're going to do this, or do you not let them know you're going to do this, right? That's a whole different piece of the conversation is, are we testing our security posture with the tools and people and things that we have in place by not telling them? And again, that's really this whole rules of engagement, right? So, have you seen that go both ways, where don't tell the security team, or absolutely tell the security team?
Well, in our case, I mean, just because of our typical customer base, we do have to let everybody know. But I would see in certain cases that being valuable, where you can, the same way we are running phishing simulations, right, as part of training programs for employees. I see that becoming more and more relevant, where you can simulate an attack and see what the SOC, how the SOC reacts to it.
Yeah, that is a good point. So, as I think through doing our own penetration testing and kind of working through that and, defining scope and role, there's one part of me that I want to make sure I'm not telling the SOC. I'm not telling the SIM or the SDR, MDR, all the DRs. I'm not telling them, because I want to make sure what we're doing on the identify and detect part is working as well, right? Yeah. So, and in these rules of engagements, having those clear, like, step one, we're not going to tell anybody. You're just going to go do your thing, and we're going to see what happens. Step two, we are going to tell everybody, because we want you to be able to bypass correctly a few of those things to see if you can get deeper, right? So, we talk about Huntress or any of the others that are, threat blocker, app blocker, this blocker, that hopefully automatically block these kinds of things. We want to see if those are working. But we want to be able to go deeper. So we want to make sure that those things are quote unquote off, or there's allowed lists in place to allow you to actually continue the work that you're doing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And often, I mean, the interesting thing is that often you may have all those measures in place, but the vulnerability can be within the code of your application. And so in those cases, even with a firewall, even with all these different mechanisms, a hacker can get through to your database just because there's a vulnerability in the application code or an underlying vulnerability in a component of the application or a dependency in the application. And that's why all these code code analysis tools are becoming so relevant. We recently established a partnership with a company called Corgia, and they have a really cool product that analyzes code and kind of cross references between different sections of the code and suggests with the solutions. So that's also an interesting piece of the puzzle, I would say.
Right. So, a lot of the MSPs hit hot. Wait a minute. Let me do this. Hold on. Wait a minute. Let me do this. Let me turn this off. I know this is going to show our general Friday Team Tim stuff, but this is a hot, spicy topic, right? And the hot, spicy topic is MSPs don't think they write code, so this shouldn't apply to us. Like, why do we care? I usually, flip that on, do you write PowerShell? Right? Do you try to manage devices via PowerShell that you grabbed off some, GitHub repo someplace? Like, are you scanning those PowerShell scripts to make sure that they're not being rogue or run inappropriately before you dump them into your RMM? I have very strong opinions on MSPs thinking they're not writing code when they're actually building out PowerShell scripts. Like we do. PowerShell can be really helpful, but you should certainly make sure that you're doing the best you can to protect that along the way. So in terms of we've identified a bucket around vulnerability scanning, both devices and web applications. We have identified a bucket around rules of engagement. We've identified a bucket of the people and the process, right? So great. I'm going to start building out. I've got a tool like Securely or Connect Secure, Nodeware, LionGuard. I've got these MSP tools that I'm using. Now I can start bundling and building this package, right? And as I start to think about it, before I get into that, what else is missing from that package? We can find stuff. We have the people. We have rules of engagement. What else?
Yeah, so two things that are typical in our engagements are having a compliance platform where you're gonna document the posture. Now you did all this testing, etc. What else is the company doing to be compliant with the regulation that applies to them? That's an important piece of the puzzle. And the other thing is who's gonna audit that as a third party. So having an auditor. So as an MSP, what I see valuable there is like how can you package all those services into one with a minimal impact to your operation where you're not doing all the work. Because that's how we started. I mean, we started pretty much being an MSP. And so here we are,
So shameless plug, I think you were trying to make, right? The idea of being able to report on what you're doing, to be able to show auditors and or maybe even potentially insurance companies that are asking for, are you doing penetration testing? The ability to do that work at scale to align the business with, I don't know, SOC2, since that's what we've been talking about, right, for the last couple of weeks, right? The ability to like get out of spreadsheets and Word docs and have something to help facilitate the audit part All right, so now we have 4 buckets, right? We have vulnerability scanning devices and humans. We have people, right? Ethical hackers. We have rules of engagement. Now we have some way to document all of this. I think there's one more bucket, right? There might be one more bucket.
What are you thinking
You mentioned, you
the
mentioned it
audit?
earlier.
The audit or
You
no?
mentioned, no, well, it relates to that, and that's the reporting, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what good is if we do all this work and we can't explain the risk to our customer? We can't show them where they're really succeeding and where they might need help, right? That whole reporting module of being able to say, hey, based on the rules of engagement, based on the work that we did and the stuff that we found, here's how well you score, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, reporting is crucial, and I think that's one of the things that you see out there. It's like, oh well, like, is this report that you are gonna give us compliant with, X and Y regulation, or is my customer gonna feel that your report is real, and believe it or not, like, so many times we hear that concern, and a lot of customers will go for a larger, more expensive pen test just because they feel the report it's gonna get them in the door, so to speak.
Yeah, I hear that a lot from our customers is, show me the reporting, tell me what you have, right? Let me know, like, how do I talk to my customer about this, which is such a great relief to me because for a long time, having MSPs actually wanting to have good data to have the conversation with their customers, such a key. You mentioned Reddit earlier. I posted something on Reddit this morning about having that conversation with your customer, and it's taken a little dumpster fire dive, but hey, maybe I finally made it to Reddit now that I'm getting my first dumpster fire. So keep those posts coming. So, but all right. So now I have in my head, I have a package, right? I think I have a package, right? I'm going to do some scanning on devices and applications. I'm going to have an expert, right? Because I don't have that internally, or my team probably doesn't have the time, or maybe our MSP is super mature and we do. We have that expert. Rules of engagement. Like, what are we actually doing on both sides of, do we tell them or do we not tell them? And lastly, the reporting. So now I have like 4 or 5 things that I can include as a compliance as a service or a penetration as a service package that I can build on and offer to my customers, right? Let me just see over here. I see a couple of little comments coming in. Oh wait, that was me. What is Pentests as a service? We talked about that already. EDR style offering. Great. Yeah. So, all right. I have the things, these 5 things. Now, from the MSP's perspective, there's a couple of ways we can slice and dice this, right? We can do good, better, best. We can do, this is the offering and it's just a line item, right? Or we can build a whole, quote unquote, cottage industry around this, especially when we're talking about cyber insurance or, I don't know, PCI for that matter, right? A lot of these credit card companies, a lot of these PCI requirements, penetration testing is one of the things that fall into that. Version 4 of PCI will be out very shortly, whether it's CMMC, compliance frameworks, right? Regulatory frameworks, or even just, let's take that out of the mix, cyber insurance, right? We're going to start to see the day here very shortly where on these insurance questionnaires, do you do penetration testing? Be like, define penetration testing. However, when your MSP's customer, right, your client, gets this questionnaire and shows the, do you do penetration testing? There is an opportunity right there for you as an MSP to say, yeah, we have this package. It consists of these 5 or 6 things, right?
Yeah.
Pricing is a whole nother conversation, right? I want to talk a little bit about what I have seen when I've been looking for our own penetration testing for what we're doing. And I've engaged with a lot of organizations over the last 6 to 9 months to talk about what is scope, what is in boundary, what roles, the things, right? What is it that we're looking at? How are we doing this laterally, vertically, diagonally, all the things. And so what I have seen from pricing wise is it's all over the map, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We've gotten some penetration engagements back that have been upwards of $40,000 or $50,000. We've gotten others that have been like, yeah, $1,000, no problem. All right, there's some happy medium between the $50,000 engagement and the $99 engagement.
Yeah.
And so when I start to think about how I want to package this as an MSP, so we have some tools. Maybe we're using Securely, right? Maybe we're using Compliance Scorecard. Maybe we're using free tools. I don't know. They might be that, but there's a level of effort on the MSP side that we should probably take into consideration. Like, how many hours is it going to take me if I do this all manually? If I go and grab a vulnerability scanner, I grab a burp suite scanner, I maybe try to educate my staff, appropriately writing the rules of engagement. It just feels like a lot of work, right? To build out a package offering.
I feel that's honestly, that's one of the challenges that we saw and we are determined to resolve, which is you have that crazy spectrum of a fully automated pen test that can cost you less than $1,000 for a yearly pen test, all the way to an enterprise pen test that can cost you upwards of $100,000. I mean, we've seen quotes of $200,000, just to give you an idea. Yeah. So
and never reached that. I think the most expensive one I got was like $51K for a one-time human-powered. That was it. Small scope.
Exactly. Yeah. And so as you can see, like you're getting billed for hours, right? That's the challenge. And so for an MSP to resell hours and put their time into that while they are busy with so many other things at the same time, I mean, to me, it's like, and we've seen it. I mean, you see it in Reddit, you see it, when you're networking with other MSPs, like their biggest challenge is how do they optimize their time so they can remain profitable, and they can have some time for themselves as well, So that's where this comes into the picture. I feel like leveraging the right tools and the right team to do this without having to overload yourself and your team with an additional product offering, that's better. And the point here, it's not only, like I know we have as the title of the webinar, profitability, right? But not only the profitability, but how you're reducing risk more effectively for your customers when you're using the right tools,
I love that. I love the reducing the risk conversation, because that is literally who and what we're all about, right? Profitability is always an interesting conversation with MSPs. And I wonder, like, don't get me wrong, some of them do it really well, but as we try to help MSPs build out a compliance as a service offering and having that conversation, I'm surprised at how many don't actually know how to do an exercise around what should we be charging, right? What is our overhead rates? What, like, they pick a number off the internet and like, okay, we charge $250 an hour, but haven't actually taken the time to do the math to figure out, should they be, and are they really profitable around that? So yeah, part of this conversation is, how do we profit? Well, we need to know what goes into it. So there's a tool cost, right? There might be multiple tool costs, but there's a human cost as well. Having that conversation with your customer, well, that's time, right? Having a TAM, a technical account manager, or an account manager, or maybe even someone a little more senior on a level 2 or level 3 technician, having that conversation. you're gonna, probably anticipate a couple of hours easily. Would you agree with that, Carol? Like
yeah,
3
easily.
hours, 10 hours, something, right?
Easily, yeah. I would
Right.
say gets close to 10 hours.
Yeah.
Talking about risk reduction and stuff like that. I was browsing this morning through some stats of prior hacks that led to bankruptcy of companies. And there was this interesting case that really called my attention. It was a company called My Biz Homepage. This was back in 2012. And so, like we don't know what's the estimated cost of that hack, but it resulted in the company closing their doors. It's
Wow.
interesting that the story was that the CTO of the company apparently was a person, who knows, offshore, or I don't know exactly how, but the person left the company and ended up hacking the company and leaving them destroyed.
So,
Yeah. So if you see
so
with compliance with SOC 2, you could have limited that risk, right? If you employ the framework properly and you offboard the people properly, et cetera, you could have reduced the risk. Granted, like the hack apparently came in through a backdoor that the CTO left within the systems. But still, like I would say, like if you have a good risk register built in your SOC 2 compliance, you can limit those risks. And again, this all comes back to how do you limit that risk as an MSP while remaining profitable,
so what you just described was insider threat, and on our Friday Team Tim conversations that we have every Friday, we've talked a lot about insider threat, right? And that's a pretty good example of insider threat. Now, had they run static code analysis, had they run Burp Suite and other tools around code analysis, they might have been able to find that vulnerability that the CTO left a hidden back door in there for him to get in, or them to get in, right?
Yeah.
So, this is where like that pen test as a service might not have 100% saved the day, but it could have exposed something like, here's a backdoor in, here's an account that we didn't know about, and it's tied to some other Gmail. Like, here's a thing that we didn't know about, and it's not authorized, but it's got full access, right? And so, being able to do this penetration stuff and uncovering that, and hopefully, saving them, quote, quote, air quotes, from, being gone,
And
all right,
apparently
so
nobody ever caught up with him. So, like who knows, like,
get
I
away
don't
with
know.
it.
Yeah, like the person didn't have a background check, which is one of the requirements for SOC 2 compliance, et cetera. It wasn't onboarded properly, it wasn't offboarded properly, like all these things that
You,
are part of compliance, right?
you just made me think of something. So this is kind of funny, right? So we're going through our own SOC 2 and ISO right now. You mentioned the word background check, and we have that as part of our process. But I was just thinking, like, as the CEO and founder, and my co-founder, who is also my wife, and I know you have a husband and wife team as well.
Yeah.
Do we background check ourselves?
I do. We did it for ourselves. Yeah. We use Certain, by the way. It's certain.com. Certain.
Yeah, certain.
Yeah.
So
I know Checker is very good too.
Both myself and my co-founder Maureen and I have recently had background checks through our previous employment. So within the last year or so, I wouldn't have been able to maintain my federal government security clearance without it. But that is a good point. I wonder how many SaaS company founders do a background check on themselves. That's interesting. All right, I digress. I'm sorry. But you just made me think of like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, that's a good idea. Like, so, all right, so back to the package price and profit part. So we now know the things that are in it. We now know that we're going to have some time involved in that. We're going to do some math around the cost of the tools, 5-10 hours of staff time and appropriate charges around staff time. So now we're like, okay, this is going to be $100 a month, whatever, pick a number. I'm only doing it for the sake of math. And so we want to obviously, make some margin on that, right? So yay, we're at $1,000 a month for this penetration testing as a service, right? So we're still in that like 12K range for the year for the client, but doing this ongoing, not having a one and done, you're going to be able to discover things as they come up, right? So in the case that you made earlier, CTO, I'm here, I'm doing my job, yay, I have the pen test as a service, I get a one-time engagement, they come in, everything's great, we've remediated, and now you have a CTO that's starting to get a little pissed off, starting to feel undervalued, underappreciated. So he just goes in the back door and does a little wonkiness that wasn't discovered a week ago when you had the one-time thing done, right? Yeah. Fast forward 5 or 6 months down the road, 8 months down the road, he's now made himself an entry point into the back end that won't be discovered because we're not doing this on an ongoing monthly basis.
Yeah, and that's why many. Sorry for the interruption, but that's why many companies are requesting people to quarterly pen testing instead of once a year. Because obviously we're developing and we're deploying to production and we're adding stuff to our infrastructure and applications, integrations much faster than ever before, and that's just going to continue to be like that. So to me, that cadence of testing plus the continuous monitoring, yes, but really the cadence of the manual pen testing also gives you more visibility into what could be there. And then the other interesting topic there, it's third parties, right? Like, why are we doing all this thing? Like, what's the real reason for pen testing? You're trying to establish trust. What's the real reason for compliance, right? You're trying to establish trust through the documenting what the security posture is, what the company general practices are, etc., and limiting risk. You being a third party for somebody else, or your customer being a third party for somebody else. So when we see like this unfortunate hack that happened to Snowflake recently, right? They are the third party, and they're affecting a bunch of other businesses. And I'm sure they are SOC 2 Type 2 compliant because they are such a big organization. And you see that those kind of things happen, and you're like, okay, well, how can we limit risk even more?
Exactly. And so, and that's why, as an MSP, we love MRR, right? We love the ability to have predictable income. Our clients are starting to like the idea of predictable spend, right? Yeah. And so, as we build out this profit center, right? Hopefully, this concept of ongoing continuous monitoring. We hear a lot about continuous monitoring in the MSP space and in the cyberspace. And so building out a package around finding stuff, going after stuff, and also remediating stuff, right? Which may or may not be part of the penetration as a service, but it's certainly a component once you've found stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so, my goodness, I feel like this is a really great opportunity for MSPs to start to do this work at scale with the appropriate people, the appropriate tools to do that. So now I'm like, I've got my tools, I've got my 5 or 6 things in my bundle. I know I want to probably charge X number of dollars for my bundle. And now I have to sell it to my customer. We've talked a little bit about that here. Kira, if I were to come to you and be like, hey, this is great, I don't have a customer that's willing to buy it, what would you do to help me there?
So, I think there's 2 things, right? Like how do you inform your existing customer base? Because we all have customers that need to check their security posture in one way or the other. In Ad Securely, we have customers that go all the way out to being e-commerce customers that have their own, they use third-party e-commerce platforms, and we still pen test those third-party e-commerce platforms. Why? Because there's integrations, there's There's code, custom code that they put in there. So you have to do the proper testing of all of that. So to me, it's more about informing and asking questions, like, well, like, what are you doing to prevent these type of risks? Have you ever tested this application with a real certified ethical hacker? And I like, like, I also want to point out something very important. While there are all these monitoring tools and all these different, applications that we're using, it's very important for the MSP to factor in the human factor in there, and put in, okay, there's some people that are going to be helping your customer navigate the issue because they don't have the expertise. I mean, even if they see a pen test, they will have no idea how to remediate it. How do you help them remediate? And potentially that becomes another source of revenue for them, right? They show the pen test as an eye opener of what can be found in there, and then that helps them also sell their services to remediate or sell their services to build compliance, right?
As you're talking, I'm pulling up your tool over here. S:// did I do this right? Hopefully I did this right. All right, so let me share my screen. So how do we market this? How do we sell this? How do we get our customers even thinking about this, right? So let me pull this up here real quick. Make sure I have the right, like you have a free scanner on your website, like drop their web address into it and see, where are you? Fortunately, we're all green. But if I were to do this on, I don't know, one of my quote unquote SOC puppet accounts, which is timgolden.com, that I explicitly don't do anything with, right? Run that because I want to use this as a testing example when I'm discussing with our customers. Like, do you really want to look bad like this? No, what you want to look like is what we did a few minutes ago, which was all green, right? So even on, you can even use, tools like that as part of the sales process, right? Being able to show your customer, like, Tim, your thing is all red. That's bad. Or, you're halfway there. Like, let's get you over the edge, right? So as I think about how do I sell this? Well, I want to be able to show something to my customer so they understand the risk that they're facing, right? And, there's some tools to do that. There's one at securely.com, right? And here, let me just pull this up real quick. There's one at securely.com. Just go to that web address, click on free scan, right? There's dozens of things like that. But beginning to have the conversation with the customer with, you have some regulatory requirements, but beyond that, like, you're exposed, even just on your homepage, right? Even just on your website, you're exposed, right? Or your app, you're exposed. These are some of the, like, simple things that we found.
Yeah. I mean, even a simple port scan, running an Nmap scan on an IP addresses will tell you a lot, and that's a good eye opener right there.
I see it all the time, and I see it like, so, side note, my other, Golden Tech Solutions, other thing, we do web work, blah, blah, blah. I have our own hosting infrastructure. 2 versions. What we do for our customers in the web hosting is we lock that down. We have things like fail to ban, right? To look for those. And the number of scans that we get against our IPs, and, we do everything we can, Cloudflare and the other things to, like, obfuscate and whatever, and proxy, but it happens, the number of, like, network scanning that hits our IP on an hourly basis is astronomical. Fortunately, I've been able to write some scripts to, like, hey, X number of requests from X number of thing, automatically block them at the firewall, blah, 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 do the things. But you would be surprised. Like, I was looking at our denied IP address list a couple days ago. There's 8,000 IP addresses in there right now. Over 8,000 IP addresses that it blocks. And before, years ago, and I go, we're way off topic here. We used to geofence, right? So And now, with the with all the cloud stuff, the AWSs, the GCP, all of those Google workspaces, like hackers just spin up a team in US East or US West or Canada or someplace. Like geofencing, probably not a thing anymore, because they'll just spin a server up someplace, and they might be coming from Istam, Samal, Paka, whatever place overseas, but they'll spin up a server in AWS and get you from there. So, all right, getting back to the subject, I continue to digress. We know what we're going to offer. We know what we're going to charge. We're going to do some pre-sales work with a couple of free tools or a couple of things to kind of show the customer the risk. Now we just get into the engagement, right? Now we have a package, and that package can help us be more profitable. And now it's just a matter of letting it loose on our sales team, right? Giving them the tools to be able to go talk to our customers and go do the work. I feel like we're missing something, but I don't know. Like my brain is just going to, this seems too easy. It seems too simple. What are we missing? Is it the sale part that's really hard? Is it the pricing part that's really hard? You were an MSP. What were some of the struggles you saw when you were trying to do this work for your customers?
I think the main struggle that we all see on the cybersecurity and compliance side is that most customers don't see it as part of their operational costs. They see it as an extra, and because it's an extra, nobody wants to spend more, right? But when they factor it in as, well, this is part of my day-to-day, it's like the lights, it's like using a computer, the internet service, like I need and I should have this to mitigate my risks, and remain compliant. So that's the biggest, and I say that goes back to, well, can you inform them? Can you really open their eyes and tell them, hey, is this something that maybe applies to you? Like will SOC 2 compliance apply to you? Or how many security questionnaires are you having to fill out every year? Because if you have SOC 2 compliance, you will not have to do that because you have a report that you can provide, etc.
Right. So you make a good point, right? So the must-have versus nice-to-have conversation, right? We talk a lot about this with client scorecard, right? With our MSPs, like, is this a must-have or a nice-to-have, right? And so for some customers, whether it's financial organizations, fintech, Sarbanes-Oxley, like, no, it's a must-have, not a nice-to-have. Unlike, potential, little Johnny's dentist office with 3 people that don't care about HIPAA at this point. Nice to have, right? And so that's always the struggle from the sales perspective is, great, we now have a package, we have some pricing, we have some stuff, but for our customers as an MSP, is this a must-have or a nice-to-have, right? And so how we help MSPs with that is, cyber insurance is probably a must-have. Would you agree? Oh, yeah. You see the light bulb go on. And then being able to, when we are invited into the conversations with our MSP customer, asking them, do you care about your cyber insurance rates? How many questions do you get on those? What kinds of questions are you getting on those, right? And that conversation around the risk starts to pivot from nice to have to must have. Like, great, I can spend $10,000 on a service and be better protected in the long run, identify my risks in the long run for 10 grand, and it might take 20 grand off my insurance renewal. I don't know. Again, math, not an insurance expert, but you get the idea is, if it can save me money on my insurance, but even more so, make me better protected. Make my company, protect my crown jewels, protect the data within our company under that MSP, right?
Yeah. By the way, we used a company for cyber insurance that was super easy to use, and I think that's going back to like the MSP's time and ability to do all these stuff, right? Because now we're talking, okay, how much time do they have to spend into working in all of this? So we used Vouch for cyber insurance, and it was a super easy process. So, and I think part of our idea too is like, how can we provide with these services to the MSP so that they can easily resell it without having to spend hours on end on their side, and have a good reporting platform to do it. So that's a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah, cyber insurance. So we love our good friends at Fifth Wall Cyber Solutions. There's lots of them out there, whether it's Fifth Wall, TechRug, Corp, Chug, the list goes on and on and on and on and on. If you're an
Yeah.
MSP listening and you're struggling with these security questionnaires, go reach out to our friends at Fifth Wall Cyber. They'll help you. And by the way, we integrate with them. So sorry, shameless plug. So
Nice.
as we wind down here, we always like to leave you with one or two key takeaways. So, Curiel, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the background up here a little bit. I'm going to let you come up here on full screen and take 2 or 3 minutes or whatever and talk about key takeaways, not just from today, but from the entire series, right? About where have we come in our SOC2 and pen testing as a journey.
Yeah, so from my perspective, I I do see on a day-to-day basis the value of following a compliance framework. In this case, we've been discussing SOC 2. I think SOC 2 it's a great starting point for you to establish best practices. Pen testing as a service will limit how much time you and your team have to put into pen testing. A lot of companies used to do their own pen testing in the past. Now you can do it with a third party. And for MSPs in this particular case, we've been discussing how MSPs can package this and price it and profit from it. I think it's a great offering, especially if you have a multi-tenant product that you can use for many of your customers. Those are my thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I should probably bring this one back up since we're chatting. Our journey here over the last couple of weeks, talking about SOC 2 compliance, talking about today, penetration testing as a service. Starting off with what the heck is penetration testing? Like, we kind of level set that. For those of you that are listening, you can go back to our YouTube channel or find it here on LinkedIn or Facebook. Like, starting with the basics of what is penetration testing. And it's beyond just running a tool, right? At least in my opinion, and Gary, I hope to not speak for you, but in my opinion, there's humans behind that at some point. There is, not just an automated tool. So what is penetration testing? People and tools and a process to find things and actively go after them in a scoped engagement. That's how I define penetration testing.
Yeah, I agree.
At a 10,000 foot view, there's probably way more of it. It's not just I bought Burp Suite and Nessus and we're good. No, it's beyond.
Yeah.
So setting that foundation of what is an actual penetration test. From there, we moved into like, is this required or not required? Right? The second session we had like a week or so ago. And what we discovered during that session was, yeah, especially if you accidentally scope it in by a policy and procedure, right? You're going through your SOC 2, right? And you downloaded some, whatever template off the interwebs, and the template said in there, yeah, we do ongoing penetration testing, and one little sentence buried deep in there you didn't even look at because you just find and replace company name, and you scoped it in, quote, by accident by grabbing a template off the interweb. Or it is actually in scope, right? So for us, looking at the security objectives and the trust principles of a SOC 2, ongoing continuous monitoring, identifying stuff like, our SaaS app runs 24/7, so we should probably do something more than just once a year, right? So being able to like do that on an ongoing basis, right? So we started with what the heck is a pen test? We moved into like, is it required, right? And a lot of people kind of probably accidentally scope it in by improper documentation, or maybe they do properly scope it in like we have. And now today, kind of wrapping it all up with how to package this, how to price this, and how to eventually profit around it, right? And so I'm going to do this real quick. I'm going to do this real quick. I'm going to pull me up. And, when I think about as an MSP offering a penetration test as a service, I'm going to define a couple of those key things. I'm going to start with scanning stuff to find those weaknesses, whether it's hardware, software, or SaaS. I'm going to start with, finding the vulnerabilities, finding the weaknesses. Then I'm going to have a human, maybe our good friends at Securely. I'm going to have a human that is trained and certified and understands this and like isn't just some, high school kid with a keyboard. I'm going to have an appropriate human as part of that engagement. I'm also going to scope that appropriately, right? I'm going to have a rules of engagement that says what we're doing, when we're doing it, how we're doing it, who we're telling, who we're not telling it. I'm going to have proper rules of engagement. I'm also going to have a really big in reporting piece of this, right? Because we want to let our customers know, like, this is what we found and what we're doing to try to fix it and how, where your risks are. And obviously, we're going to have some kind of mechanism to track these things as they align to a compliance framework, or even just cyber insurance pieces as well. So our key takeaway is, while it sounds simple enough to build a bundle, and there's a lot of great people and process and platforms to help you do that, really having the conversation with your customer around understanding their risk and looking at ways of exposing that risk and hopefully and ultimately remediating that risk. So that would be my key takeaway, building some kind of process around these are the things, this is how much it costs, and having the risk conversation with your customer. Carol, any parting words?
I just want to thank you again for opening this space for us. We really enjoyed the conversations and looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, and since we're all wrapped up here on this particular topic, I want to just touch real quick. We are working together with Securely. They are one of our strategic alliance partners, and we're working together to build a community better together for the MSPs. Our good friend Michelle over at Langall calls it 10xing the ecosystem. I keep wanting to coin that, but she beat me to it, so great. But us as vendors working side by side to develop joint solutions together to help you as the MSP have that risk conversation, do these things and operationalize them at scale in the tools that you're already using, right? So we're really excited to have you, Carol, and your team as we build out our strategic alliance together, as we build out APIs together, and being able to just have the risk conversation amongst the MSP community and your customers.
Yeah, that's the best. Thank you, Tim.
Of course. All right, everybody. We will see you next week. UATest is coming up next week. So we're really excited to talk about our next strategic alliance that we're working on. And everybody have a great rest of your week. Stay cool for those of us in New England, and we'll see you next week.
Subscribe now.